I have something to confess. A confession that might not surprise you. You know my solo camping video that I made? Well, I need to tell you all what really happened. The serene, calm, picture-perfect experience that I showed wasn't exactly the full story. I mentioned in my podcast before the trip that I'm not exactly an outdoorsy person, but it's not for lack of wanting to be. I'm just way too aggravated by the heat, annoyed by the bugs, the harsh sun, and the unpredictability of the Texas weather. You have no idea how many times I've planned to grill on the weekend, only to be noped by a severe thunderstorm that comes out of nowhere, wrecks my plans, and turns my lawn into the world's unsexiest mud fight. I hate being dirty, and I'm really grossed out by things that a grown man shouldn't be. Even when I went fishing with my dad in my 20s, he still had to worm my hook like I was a toddler. But camping is really awesome in theory. I'm not a hiker, I'm not much of a swimmer, and camping just requires a little bit of setup, and then you're set to chill. And I've watched so many solo campers on YouTube over the last few years, so yeah, I pulled the trigger and I booked 2 nights at a campsite to go solo camping. I spent over 2 weeks planning and prepping and buying so much gear since I have never really camped before, and the only things I really had was a tent and a sleeping bag. I took about 14 trips to REI, getting everything from a sleeping pad and pillow, small organization things, and everything that I would need to cook while out camping. This was the part I was really looking forward to. I'm not particularly a good cook, but it's one of those things that I get really into sometimes, and I'll buy all the gadgets that I need to make like one specific thing, and they'll just end up collecting dust in my cabinets until 2 years later, somebody asks for a creme brulee for their birthday and I can break out my butane torch. So of course I went out and got a little portable stove, a compact pan, titanium dishes, an egg holder, mini squeeze bottles. I mean, y'all, I spent way too much money on all of this stuff just because it looks cool. Like, who do I think I am? I planned out a few meals, including fajitas with like chopped bell peppers and tortillas, some sausage rolls, eggs for breakfast, and of course a steak with some baby broccoli and tomatoes for my dinner for the final night. I even cooked in my pan the night before to give it a little bit of a pregame so it could be ready to be the star of the show. I also decided that since I was going to be missing my usual night at the Flying Saucer, where I'm trying to get my commemorative plate for tasting 200 different beers, that I would go the night before and pick up 3 of their to-go crowlers. After I watched like 400 solo camping videos the night before, I packed up my gear and made the 4-hour trip down to Dripping Springs near Austin. As I was getting into town, a huge storm rolled through, but it had passed by the time I got down to the campsite. The only problem is that it was just enough to completely turn the entire place into a mud bath. I couldn't even drive my car all the way up to the campsite, so I had to load my gear into a wheelbarrow and take it piece by piece up to the site, up a hill, through the mud, immediately ruining my shoes and getting a lot of my gear pretty dirty right from the start. And anyone who's from Texas knows that when the sun comes out right after a thunderstorm, it turns to humid city. I was immediately in a sauna, drenched in sweat in like 45 seconds. My setup was great, and putting together the rain tarp and the tent actually went really well because I gave it a dry run in my backyard the week before. If I hadn't done that, I don't think I would have been prepared for putting it together out there on the campsite. I'm pretty sure if that part of it was very hard, it would have broke me down way too early. I made my first meal and sat down to chill, but it was just immediately so hot. Like I literally couldn't think about anything else. I brought some stuff to draw, but I was just so uncomfortable, I didn't even want to mess with it. A couple hours passed by and I cracked open my first beer. I lit up my first campfire and then immediately had the second beer. And y'all, these are 32-ounce high ABV beers. Let's just say I got f***ed up. I was so tipsy and so hot, all I could do was get in the tent and pass out at 8 p.m. without even cooking dinner. And I just kept waking up drenched in sweat. There was like a me-shaped sweat stain on my mattress. And I just forced myself to sleep through the night and woke up at 8 a.m. Yeah, I slept for 12 hours, only getting up like once to pee. The next morning, this breeze came through and it was incredible. So I was able to use the rest of my sausage, cook it up with my eggs, and have a nice little breakfast. But by the time I was trying to enjoy my extremely hot coffee, the sun was peeking back into my campsite, scorching everything again. I literally couldn't enjoy anything. I was just sitting there for hours, just sweating. The tent was an oven, and the rain tarp was not meant to block out the sun, so it did very little to provide any relief in the shade. I was so sweaty, I couldn't draw because I was just gonna get my pages all wet and probably dissolve the ink. So after a few hours of being so drenched in sweat that my shirt literally grew 2 sizes, I gave up and I went to a brewery that I passed on the way into the campsite. It was pretty awesome. I had a couple of beers. I got to draw under a very powerful AC vent, and it was like exactly the relief that I needed from this miserable heat. I felt like getting food there was like way too much of a cop-out, so I decided not to do that and go back to my campsite, and I would eat there. When I got back, it was still way too hot and sunny to do anything, so I admittedly sat in the car with the AC running for like an hour, but I got hungry and I needed to get out and cook. I really wanted to make the steak, but it was so hot. Like, I literally couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't really do any of the prep that I wanted to do, and I didn't want to spend a single second out there in that heat more than I absolutely had to. So I copped out again, and I just made my packet of instant ramen that I brought as a backup just in case. When that was done, I drank another beer, and I forced myself to pass out at 8 p.m. again. I didn't make another fire, and I really didn't get to cook dinner. But this time, I didn't sleep for 12 hours. I was woken up at 3 a.m. to the sounds of rain hitting the tarp outside. And it started out sounding like calm and peaceful, but then the thunder and the lightning started. The wind started blowing sideways rain onto the walls of my tent, surpassing the rain tarp and soaking in and getting onto the floor of my tent. Luckily, it didn't turn out to be that bad. I mean, it was just a tiny little drip, but it was enough to like give me anxiety and make me, stay up for 2 hours packing my things and getting ready to run out to the car in case things got way too dicey to stay in the tent. Look, I think overall, it was a lot of high highs and low lows. I really enjoyed the things that I got to do when it wasn't just miserably hot and ruining my life, but there was definitely more times where it was just really, really uncomfortable. The time alone was awesome. Cooking outside was awesome. Well, before everything turned to 95 degrees. And waking up in the woods to the sounds of like birds chirping and that beautiful breeze was really that was like the most perfect part of the experience that I wanted. A smarter me would have done this trip in the fall, but what are you gonna do? You live and you learn. I made my bed and I had to sweat in it. This definitely didn't ruin camping for me, and I have all this gear now, so I'm definitely gonna do this again, but maybe in that tiny little window of time between where Texas goes from deathly hot to deathly cold. I just need to make sure that I do it next to a big city like Austin so I can do what I did this time, which is get a hotel room on my last night, take the best shower of my life, and eat some pizza in bed. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for checking out my channel. And like always, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.